Everyone throws around the term negative gearing like it's a strategy. It's not. It's simply a tool to manage your tax position.
Basically, it's the way to soften the blow while property costs more to hold than it earns in rent.
Exactly. Every investment has what we call holding costs. If you buy shares, you pay brokerage fees. If you start a business, you wear some losses before it turns a profit. Property is no different. The goal is that the growth outweighs the cost.
So in theory, you're paying a little now to make a lot more later if you invest smartly.
All right, so we've talked about what negative gearing really is. It's a tool, not a strategy. But what does that actually look like in the real world? Let's put some numbers to it so you can actually see how it really plays out. And to walk us through that, I'll hand it over to our residential numbers nerd.
Thanks, Adrian.
You love it.
Yeah, let's get into it. Meet George. George earns $90,000 a year and pays about $21,500 in tax. He's invested in a property, brings in $31,000 in rent, but costs him $51,000 a year to hold that property. That's interest, maintenance, insurance, the lot. So George is down $20,000 for the year.
And that's what people call being negatively geared. The property is losing money every single year, but there's a twist.
Because it's negative geared, George can offset the losses against his income. His taxable income drops from $90,000 to $70,000, which means he gets a tax refund of around $6,900.
But here's the catch. After that refund, he's still down about $13,000 in real cash. So he's lost money to get a smaller tax bill.
Yeah, not exactly the financial hack people think it is.
Exactly. The refund softens a blow, but it doesn't make property profitable.
So basically, he's bleeding cash, and the tax office is giving him a pat on the back for it.
Pretty much. So that's how negative gearing works in practice. You can see how the numbers play out. For some people, it can make sense, but for others, it's just money slipping through the cracks every single month. The question is, when does it actually work? And when is it just a slow leak?
I guess this is the part where we tell them not to rely on tax refunds to get rich.
Exactly. Let's go through both sides so you can see where it helps and where it hurts. Negative gearing can make sense, but only when you bought the right property in the right market. It works when the growth outweighs the costs. Say your property costs you, $10,000 a year to hold, but it grows by $80,000 in value. That's a trade worth making, in my opinion.
Yeah, you'll take that deal every day of the week.
Exactly, my dear friend. That's when negative gearing does its job. It helps you hold quality assets long enough for the growth to make it worthwhile. It can also work early in your journey when you're focused on building equity that you can use for the next purchase. As long as you've got the strong income, a bit of a buffer, and the right fundamentals behind you, it can be a pretty smart move.
So when does it not work?
It doesn't work when growth never comes. If you bought in an area with low demand or oversupply, that $10,000 loss just compounds year after year.
That's when it turns into a slow leak instead of a strategy.
Exactamundo. Or worse, if you're relying on that tax refund just to stay afloat, you're already in trouble. That's not an investment plan, that's literally a warning sign.
And it's usually the sign that someone bought the wrong property in the wrong area.
Yep, spot on. So if negative gearing can work in the right situation and backfire in the wrong one, the question is, what should you actually focus on? Because the tax position isn't what creates wealth. It's the performance of the property that does.
This is where we start talking about the real stuff, right? The things that actually make property grow.
Exactamundo. Exactamundo? Exactamundo, my dear friend. Let's talk about what really drives growth and why it matters much more than a refund from a tax office. What if instead of chasing tax deductions, you focused on what actually drives property growth? Because here's the truth. The tax office doesn't care if your property goes up or down in value, but you actually will. It's the fundamentals that separate a property that quietly bleeds cash from one that builds wealth. Things like local jobs, infrastructure projects, population growth, housing supply, and how the council is planning for the future.
Yeah, that's the stuff that actually moves the market.
You're onto it, Mr. Frank. If those factors are working in your favor, any short-term holding costs don't matter. But if they aren't, that negative gearing strategy just becomes a slow leak that compounds year after year. And that's the part most investors miss. They focus on the refund instead of the results. They buy the wrong property in the wrong area, And then they sit there wondering why it's not performing.
And by that time, they figure it out. It's too late.
You cannot tax deduct your way out of a bad investment. So if you want to know how to avoid that and find areas that actually grow in value, watch our next video. We'll break down the key fundamentals we use to spot suburbs that outperform every single year.
Spoiler alert, it's not the refund.
Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha.